Well, I became the pastor here in 2014, so it's been a little over 8 years. And in that time, I have officiated more than a dozen memorial services here in the church for church members who have died. And those services are always so sacred, so meaningful, and so important. They're not only a way for us to honor and celebrate our loved one who has passed, but they also allow us to come together as a spiritual family to support one another and to comfort one another during our time of grief. But you know, in all the years that I've been the pastor here, I've never once, not one time, been asked to officiate a memorial service for a loved one who wasn't human. I wonder why that is. In the years I've been the pastor, several of you have lost your beloved pets. Why don't we have memorial services in the church for them? I shared with you the year before COVID, Greg and I said a tearful goodbye to our beloved cat, Oscar. And even though it's been more than 3 years now, in many ways, we are still going through the grieving process. Oscar was like our child. In fact, we referred to him as our son. Okay? I think it would have been really helpful for us 3 years ago to have had a memorial service for Oscar, to share photos of him and stories of him, and to honor and celebrate our love. This morning when I went on Facebook, one of our newer church members, Ginny Makita, posted something that I didn't know, that today is the National Pet Memorial Day. Many of you know that Ginny has been called to animal ministry. She ministers to people who are grieving the loss of their pets and is currently studying animal chaplaincy, which is such a wonderful thing. Next year, I'm going to have you give the message on this Sunday. But Ginny, we're so grateful that you've been called to that ministry because animals are a gift from God. They are a way that we get to connect with the presence of the divine. Throughout the Bible, from the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, which Sue read from this morning, to Noah's Ark, to Jonah and the whale, to even Jesus' stories and parables, there are so many references to animals. Animals help us to experience God's unconditional love and care. A 13th century Christian mystic whose name was Meister Eckhart, he said, if I spend enough time with even the smallest of creatures, I would never have to prepare a sermon again, because so full of God is every creature. So full of God is every creature. And St. Francis of Assisi, who many of you know was the patron saint of animals, said that all creatures are children of God, and therefore they're our brothers and sisters. Have you ever thought about it that way, that the animals are our siblings? One of my favorite quotes in the whole entire Bible that has to do with animals comes from the book of Job, and it says, "Ask the animals what they think. Let them teach you. Let the birds tell you what's going on. Put your ear to the earth and learn. Listen, the fish in the ocean will tell you their stories. Isn't it clear that they all know and agree that God is in the life of every living thing?" God is in the life of every living thing. And that's why, as I have grown in consciousness, in spiritual understanding, I find it harder and harder to swat a fly or to kill a spider in my house. That is true. Because I've come to understand that the life that animates them is the same life that animates me. The life of the Creator. It's in them, it's in our cats, it's in our dogs. It's in the animals that we hunt for sport, And it's also in the animals that we eat for food. Now, I am not a vegetarian, but I know some of you are. Some of you for health reasons, and others of you for spiritual reasons. If you look at the life of saintly figures, many of the world's greatest spiritual teachers of all different faith traditions, many of them were vegetarians, maybe even Jesus. A few years ago, the organization PETA, P-E-T-A, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, they put up billboards all over the country with pictures of Jesus, and it said, Jesus was a vegetarian. And there is actual theological study that has looked into this. It is a possibility. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 1940s, we learned a lot about an early Christian group called the Ebionites. They were followers of Jesus' brother, James. I know for some Christians that's a surprise that Jesus had a brother, but the followers of James, Jesus' brother, were the Ebionites, and the Dead Sea Scrolls told us that they were vegetarians. So it would make sense that if they are the first followers of Jesus, that they would be following his way of life. And we know that Jesus followed John the Baptist, and John the Baptist did not eat meat. Now, I don't know whether Jesus was a vegetarian or not, but I know that he saw God in all of creation, that he would not harm anything that was a creation of God. In our first reading this morning from the book of Genesis, we hear the creation story in which God creates us in God's image and then gives us dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all of the creatures. And sadly, so many Christians have misunderstood that word dominion. They think that it means domination, that we could do whatever we want with the animals because God gave us dominion over them. But that is not what the word dominion means. The word dominion means stewardship. God was calling us to be caretakers of the animals. And interestingly enough, if you read that reading again, God says to us, I have given you every seed-bearing plant and every fruit-bearing tree as your food. God doesn't say, I gave you all the animals for your food. It says, I gave you every seed-bearing plant and every fruit-bearing tree for your food. Now, Jesus, at the Last Supper, the last meal that he shared with his friends was a Passover Seder, but we don't hear about any meat being served. We know it's a meal of bread and wine. And Leonardo da Vinci, who famously painted that scene of the Last Supper, said this. He said, the time will come when men such as I will look upon the murder of animals as they look upon the murder of men. And one of the very first Christians, Saint Clement, said, it is far better to be happy than to have your bodies act as graveyards for animals. And Albert Einstein, who was not only a great intellectual but also a great spiritual teacher, said, if the whole world adopts vegetarianism, it can change the destiny of humankind. Nothing will benefit human health and increase chances of survival of life on Earth as much as the evolution to a vegetarian diet. Man was not born to be a carnivore. Our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. Now, I am not advocating that we all go out and become vegetarians today. But what I am suggesting is that we educate ourselves, that we become more aware and enlightened, especially the treatment of animals. Many of you know that many animals are brutally tortured in food production. We need to treat all of God's creatures with dignity and respect, to treat them humanely. They are a gift from God. As Eckhart Tolle wrote in our Words of Integration and Guidance this morning, he said he believes that animals are closer to God than humans because they are not caught up in the veil of the mind. And I think that that is really true. You know, I tell you almost week after week the importance of prayer and meditation. What we're doing in prayer and meditation is we're going beyond the veil of the mind, beyond our thoughts, so that we can get closer to the source of the divine. Pets help us to do that. Animals help us to become present and still. And as Jesus said in today's gospel reading, look at the birds of the air. They don't worry about anything. God meets all of their needs. I guarantee you, your dog or your cat is not worried about what's going on in Washington, D.C. They're not stressed about the stock market. They're at peace. So they are our spiritual teachers. And so today, on this Sunday that we are celebrating animals, let us celebrate and honor the pets that are in our lives. Let us focus on the spirituality of animals that helps us to become more mindful and present and to experience God's unconditional love and care for us. And let us recommit ourselves as a creation justice church of being good stewards of all of the creatures, great and small, that God has entrusted to our care. Namaste. Hello, everybody. This is Sal Sapienza, and I'm so excited to share with all of you that I've written a brand new book. The book is called Childish Thinking: How the Church Keeps Us Stuck in Sunday School. Now, the title Childish Thinking comes from Christian scripture, where we hear that if we wish to grow in spiritual understanding, then we must let go of childish ways of thinking. And yet so many Christians today, even after years of Bible study and Sunday services, still have a very elementary understanding of their faith. They still understand God as some old man with a long gray beard. They think heaven is a place up in the clouds with pearly gates, that the devil is some red guy with horns and a pitchfork, and that hell is a fiery place below the earth. Those are things that we tell children. None of those descriptions appear anywhere in the Bible. And so in Childish Thinking, I try to dispel many of those misnomers, and I explore topics such as God, Jesus, heaven, hell, sin, prayer, and resurrection from the higher perspectives of ancient Christian mystics and contemporary progressive theologians. After each chapter, there are prayers for quiet contemplation and questions for personal reflection and journal writing. Come learn how you can let go of old ways of thinking and begin to see things with new eyes. Come and learn how you can finally graduate from Sunday school. The book is available now on Amazon, and you can read the entire introduction at childishthinking.faith.